The church was full. I counted 43 people from the back row, colleagues, neighbors, old friends who drove 3 hours to be there. The casket was mahogany. She had picked it herself apparently. Good taste even in grief. My wife stood at the front in white. Not mourning white. Celebration white. The kind of dress you wear when something ends that you wanted to end for a very long time. She dabbed her eyes with a tissue. Smiled at the pastor. Accepted a hug from my business partner who stood just close enough to be comfort and just far enough to be appropriate. I watched all of it from the last pew. Hat put low. Glasses I never normally wear. My name printed on the program in my hands. My photo on the stand beside the casket. My name is Ethan Cross. I'm 43 years old, and I had been dead for exactly 9 days. Let me tell you what brought me to that back pew. 6 weeks ago I was a completely different man. Successful. Settled, certain about my life in the way people become certain when they stop paying attention to the small things that eventually become everything. I ran a mid-size investment firm. Built over 15 years from a single room and a shared printer that jammed every third page. Profitable. Respected. Clean. My business partner was a man named Carter Webb. 12 years of friendship. 12 years of building something together from nothing. I trusted him with every decision that mattered. My wife Natalie and I had been married for 9 years. She was elegant and strategic, the kind of woman who planned 3 steps ahead in every conversation and made it look effortless. I had always found that quality impressive. I found it something else entirely by the end. 6 weeks ago I came home early from a client dinner. The house was quiet, but something felt wrong in the particular way that things feel wrong before you can name what it is. Just a quality of silence that has recently replaced a sound you didn't know you were listening for. I walked through every room. Nothing disturbed. Nothing missing. But in my home office the desk drawer was slightly open. I always close it completely. Always. I stood in the doorway and looked at that small gap for a long time. Then I walked over and opened it fully, and everything I thought I knew about my life began to unravel in the space between one breath and the next. My personal files inside the drawer had been reorganized, not dramatically, just slightly, as if someone had gone through them carefully and replaced them almost perfectly. Almost. I had a specific system, specific order, specific angles on each folder. 3 files were wrong. All 3 related to the same thing, my life insurance policy. I told myself I was being paranoid, told myself Natalie had probably been looking for something ordinary, tax documents, warranty records. I closed the drawer and went to bed, but I didn't sleep. And the next morning I started paying attention in a way I hadn't paid attention in years. 2 weeks later I noticed Natalie researching vacation destinations on her tablet, remote ones, Alaska, Patagonia, Norwegian fjords. She mentioned it casually over dinner one evening. Said we should do something adventurous this year. She had never used that word before, adventurous. I smiled and agreed. But that night after she fell asleep I picked up her tablet and searched the specific trails she had bookmarked. Every single one shared the same characteristics. No cell service. Extreme weather unpredictability. High accident rates. I closed the tablet and placed it back exactly where I found it. 3 days before I died I found a receipt. Not hidden, just sitting in her coat pocket when I moved it from the chair. A pharmacy receipt with 2 items. Her regular prescription at the top, and below it a compound I didn't recognize. I photographed it with my phone and sent it to a doctor friend at 11 at night. His response came back in 4 minutes. Where did you find this? Call me. I called him immediately. He was quiet for a long moment after I explained. Then he said 7 words that I still hear clearly when I close my eyes at night. Ethan, this is used for cardiac simulation. My personal files inside the drawer had been reorganized, not dramatically, just slightly, as if someone had gone through them carefully and replaced them almost perfectly. Almost. I had a specific system, specific order, specific angles on each folder. 3 files were wrong. All 3 related to the same thing, my life insurance policy. I told myself I was being paranoid, told myself Natalie had probably been looking for something ordinary, tax documents, warranty records. I closed the drawer and went to bed, but I didn't sleep. And the next morning I started paying attention in a way I hadn't paid attention in years. 2 weeks later I noticed Natalie researching vacation destinations on her tablet, remote ones, Alaska, Patagonia, Norwegian fjords. She mentioned it casually over dinner one evening, said we should do something adventurous this year. She had never used that word before. Adventurous. I smiled and agreed. But that night after she fell asleep I picked up her tablet and searched the specific trail she had bookmarked. Every single one shared the same characteristics. No cell service. Extreme weather unpredictability. High accident rates. I closed the tablet and placed it back exactly where I found it. 3 days before I died I found a receipt. Not hidden. Just sitting in her coat pocket when I moved it from the chair. A pharmacy receipt with 2 items, her regular prescription at the top, and below it a compound I didn't recognize. I photographed it with my phone and sent it to a doctor friend at 11 at night. His response came back in 4 minutes. "Where did you find this? Call me." I called him immediately. He was quiet for a long moment after I explained. Then he said 7 words that I still hear clearly when I close my eyes at night. "Ethan, this is used for cardiac simulation." I didn't sleep that night. By 6 in the morning I had made 3 decisions that would determine everything that followed. First, I would not confront Natalie. Second, I would not go to the police yet. Third, I needed to understand the complete architecture of what was happening before I moved a single piece of it. I called my doctor friend again in the morning and asked him directly, if someone administered this compound gradually over time, what would it look like from the outside? He was careful with his words. Fatigue, he said, irregular heartbeat. Eventually something that would present clinically as natural cardiac arrest. I asked about timeline. He said weeks, possibly less depending on dosage and frequency. I went to my office and pulled 3 months of financial records. Natalie had accessed our joint investment account 11 times in the past 8 weeks. Not withdrawals, just access, like someone studying the layout of a room before deciding where to move the furniture. Then I pulled my life insurance documents, $3.2 million policy, Natalie listed as sole beneficiary. Updated 14 months ago. The problem was I hadn't updated anything 14 months ago. I pulled the original signature page and looked at it under my desk lamp for a long time. My name was there, the pen pressure was wrong. I have a very specific way of writing my name, heavy pressure on the first letter, light on the loop at the end. This signature was even throughout. Practiced. Someone had studied my handwriting carefully and reproduced it well, just not perfectly. I sat with that forged signature in my hands and understood something for the first time with complete clarity. This wasn't impulsive. This wasn't a moment of desperation. This had been planned, carefully, over a significant period of time, by someone who knew exactly what they were doing. I picked up my phone and called Carter Webb, my business partner, my oldest friend. I asked him to meet me privately. He agreed immediately. No questions. No location preference. Just yes. And when. Like a man who had been waiting for exactly this call. We met at a bar across town that evening. Carter arrived looking composed in a way that felt wrong for the circumstances. Too settled, too prepared, like a man who had already rehearsed this conversation in his head and knew how it ended. I told him everything across that table, the compound, the forged signature, the vacation research, the specific trails with no cell service. I watched his face carefully the entire time I spoke, and he did something I had not anticipated at all. He didn't look shocked. He didn't lean forward with concern or reach for his phone to call someone. He looked relieved. The specific relief of a person who has been carrying something very heavy for a very long time and is finally being allowed to put it down. "How long have you known?" he asked quietly. I stared at him across the table. "Known what?" I said. He looked at his glass for a moment. Then he told me that Natalie had approached him 8 months ago, said the marriage was over, said I had become someone she didn't recognize anymore. She had wanted to know if he would help her. Help her with what, I asked. He didn't answer immediately. He just said that she told him it would look natural, cardiac, clean, that I had apparently been having heart irregularities already. Which was interesting because I hadn't been having any heart irregularities, until very recently. Carter said he had refused immediately, but then he looked up at me across the table and said something that shifted everything again. He said that after he refused, Natalie had told him she would find someone else who didn't. I drove home slowly that night thinking about one thing. Natalie had approached Carter 8 months ago. He had refused. She had found someone else, which meant there was a third person in this equation that I hadn't identified yet, someone with the specific knowledge and willingness to carry this out. Someone she had found and trusted enough to bring into a plan that required absolute precision. I went through our social circle methodically over the following 2 days. New people who had entered our lives in the past year. Natalie had joined a gym 8 months ago. Right after Carter refused her, she had hired a personal trainer named Derek Voss, 3 sessions a week. Every week for 8 months without missing a single one. I searched his name thoroughly. Clean online presence. Professional profile. Nothing obviously unusual, but his previous employment listed a pharmaceutical distribution company. The same company that manufactured the compound on that pharmacy receipt. She hadn't fallen for someone else. She had hired someone else. That distinction made everything significantly colder. An affair is emotion. A contractor is intention. Emotion can be reasoned with. Intention cannot. I called Carter that night and told him what I had found. Then I told him what I needed to do next. I need to disappear, I said. Completely. For 30 days. I need to watch what happens when everyone believes I'm gone. There was a long silence on the line, then Carter said something quietly. You want to fake your own death? I want to watch what comes next, I told him. Another silence. Then he said he would help me, and I believed him. That was my second mistake. The accident was convincing. Carter arranged everything through connections I hadn't known he had. A car, a bridge, a river with a current strong enough to explain why no body was recovered. The police report was filed on a Monday morning. By Wednesday evening, Natalie had already called the insurance company, not to ask questions about the process, not to understand timelines, to begin the claim actively. I found that out through Carter. She had called within 48 hours of my official death. I watched my own obituary appear online on Thursday morning. Carter sent me the funeral details on Friday. I arrived at the church early on Sunday and took the last pew. Hat pulled low. Glasses I never wear. I sat and watched 43 people grieve a man who was sitting 12 rows behind, all of them breathing the same air. Natalie stood at the front in white and accepted condolences with the precise calibration of a woman who had thought carefully about how much grief was appropriate for this specific audience. Not too much, not too little, exactly enough to be believable without being memorable. Carter sat 3 rows ahead of me and gave a eulogy where his voice broke twice. Genuinely broke, because whatever else was true about him, he was still saying goodbye to 12 years, and some part of that was real. Then I saw Derek Voss, sitting in the 4th row. At my funeral, the man Natalie had hired to end my life was sitting at the service she had arranged to mark the end of it. He was holding the printed program, and on the back of it he had written something I couldn't read from where I sat. But Natalie glanced at it once during the service, and she smiled, just briefly, just enough. I left before the reception and sent Carter one message. 4th row, Derek Voss, find out everything you can. He called me 3 hours later and his voice was completely different from any version of it I had heard before, tight in a way that told me whatever he had found had surprised even him. Ethan, he said, the insurance policy. What about it? I asked. There are 2 of them. I went completely still. He explained that the policy I knew about was the $3.2 million with Natalie as beneficiary. But a second policy had been filed 6 months ago through a different broker entirely, $1.8 million. I asked who the beneficiary was. Carter paused for longer than he needed to. Derek Voss, he said. She hadn't just hired a contractor, she had insured him as a partner, which meant when everything was completed she wasn't planning to disappear alone into whatever life she had constructed beyond mine. She was planning to disappear with him, $5 million total, perfectly clean, perfectly untraceable. 2 policies, 2 brokers, 1 natural cardiac event. Nobody looks too carefully at a man with a documented history of heart irregularities. I sat in the dark in my temporary apartment and thought about the architecture of what she had built. Then I picked up my phone and made the call that ended it. Not to the police, to the insurance company. I'd like to report a fraudulent claim, I said. They asked my name. I told them. There was a long pause. Mr. Cross, the woman said carefully. Our records indicate you are deceased. I know, I told her. That's the fraud. 3 days later, I walked into a police precinct. Alive. Documented. Every piece of evidence organized into a file that took 4 months of quiet, careful work to build. The compound from the pharmacy. The forged signature with the wrong pen pressure. The vacation bookmarks with their consistent characteristics. Carter's testimony. Derek Voss's employment history connecting him directly to the pharmaceutical manufacturer. The second insurance policy filed 6 months ago. 30 days of documented conspiracy laid out in sequence that told one clear story from beginning to end. Natalie was arrested on a Tuesday morning while she was getting ready for a spa appointment. Still in her robe. Still holding her coffee. Derek Voss was taken into custody 40 minutes later across town. The expression on Natalie's face when she opened her front door and saw me standing behind the officers was something I had thought about many times in the weeks leading up to that moment. I had imagined fear, I had imagined guilt, I had imagined collapse. What I actually saw was none of those things. It was the very specific expression of a person who has identified the single calculation error in an otherwise perfect plan, not emotional, analytical, even at the end. Then at the precinct something happened that I had not anticipated and that changed the shape of everything one final time. Going through Derek Voss's phone, investigators found a recording, made 8 months ago, in a bar across town. Carter's voice was clear on the recording. Natalie's voice asking him to help, his voice saying no, and then after a pause that the recording captured perfectly, his voice again saying something else entirely, something that explained the relief on his face when I told him everything across that table. If you find another way, Carter had said on that recording, make sure the second policy names me too. He hadn't refused her. He had negotiated his position, the eulogy where his voice broke twice, the 12 years of friendship, the help arranging my disappearance. All of it filtered now through that single sentence on a recording made 8 months ago in a bar I had chosen because I thought it was far enough from anyone who knew us. Carter was arrested that evening. 3 people, 1 plan, 3 completely different angles of the same betrayal. My wife who wanted my money, my contractor who wanted her, my best friend who wanted both. The company survived under emergency management and then new permanent leadership. The insurance claims were voided. Both policies cancelled. The legal proceedings took 14 months and resulted in convictions on all 3 counts across all 3 defendants. I moved to a different city, different apartment, smaller, quieter, a place where nobody knew my name or my face or the story that had been in the news for 3 weeks and then disappeared the way these stories always eventually disappear. People ask me what I think about when I can't sleep, and I always think about the same thing, not the compound, not the forged signature with the wrong pen pressure, not the $5 million or the second insurance policy or the recording in a bar that ended 12 years of friendship in one sentence. I think about the flowers, white lilies at the front of that church, her favorite. She had chosen them herself, apparently along with the mahogany casket and the specific readings and the order of service. She had planned every detail of my funeral with the same precision she had brought to planning everything else, and she had chosen her favorite flowers, not mine. Not once in 9 years had she learned what flowers I would have wanted at the end of my life. You can plan someone's death very carefully. You can forge their signature and research compounds and file insurance policies through separate brokers and hire contractors and map out every variable and contingency over the course of a year. You can do all of that with extraordinary precision and discipline and intelligence. But if you choose the wrong flowers, you have told me everything I need to know about how well you actually understood the person you were trying to erase. She underestimated me for 9 years. She got the flowers wrong for 9 years. And in the end, those 2 things turned out to be exactly the same mistake.